Hey gang, what's going on? And welcome to Talking Vegas All Day with KA. I'm your host KA, and I hope everyone's doing well out there. On today's episode, I'm going to pick back up with my Vegas Icon series. Now, if you guys remember, last year in 2021, I did a series of episodes on the Stratosphere, specifically Bob Stupek. And I had a lot of fun doing it, and it had really good reviews. So I thought in early 2022, I'd bring that series back. And today, we're going to do one of probably two parts, maybe three, I haven't decided yet, on another Vegas icon, and one of my personal favorites, one of the last cowboys of Las Vegas. I'm talking none other than the infamous gangster known as Benny Binion. In today's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about his growing up, and then also about his upbringing and his time in Vegas. But before we get started, make sure to hit that like button, click subscribe, and punch that notification bell so you can get up-to-date information when we drop new episodes. And also leave a comment. Have you been to Binion's? Do you have a funny story about Benny? Did you actually meet Benny? We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to interact with me on social media, I'm at Twitter at Vegas_KA and on Instagram and Facebook at Talkin' Vegas All Day with KA. And the show is available also on Apple and Spotify podcast platforms as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on Talkin' Vegas All Day with me, KA.
Let's go to Vegas, baby. Let's go tonight.
Right now.
Let's go to Vegas. We'll stay up all night. Let's go to Vegas.
So Benny grew up in rural Texas, and as a kid, he was fairly ill a lot of times, and mostly he spent time with his father growing up, who was a horse trader, and he traveled around with his father, and he had no formal education due to the fact that he was very ill. Early on, Benny got into the trading, rustling, the gambling, into the vice life. And he started kind of hanging out with the wrong crowd, so to speak. And through his teenage years, Benny was working with his father. He had now moved up, kind of one of his dad's leading men in the horse trading business. However, he soon got into some illegal stuff, such as moonshining, racketeering, some gun charges, and even 2 counts of murder, which he was convicted of. He did get some time, but was left off because they couldn't prove it. And then he was also got on a bootlegging charge as well. That's crazy when you think about it. Past his teenage years, Benny decided to move to Dallas, Texas, and that's where things really took off for him. He started getting in with the wrong crowd and started feuds with some other notorious crime syndicates in the area. And Benny, being the smart man he is, he kind of got in with the right group, the Chicago groups, and he also got in with the politicians and treated them well. Benny basically then went on and started slowly taking control of the bootlegging and the vice life of Dallas, Texas throughout most of his early adult years. For a time, he became one of the most powerful people and eventually became the head guy in Dallas, Texas. Everything went through Benny. That's kind of where his time in Texas slowly starts to take a turn, because you see, Benny had a very nasty temper and Benny didn't like to be challenged. And there was a notorious rival of his who, would basically try to undermine Benny, try to take his money. And of course, Benny, like any gangster, didn't like that. So what did Benny do? Well, Benny was known for pipe bombs, so Benny first did a car bombing, which unfortunately this gentleman's wife was in, and the car blew up. Of course, Benny never was charged with anything. But then the second time, Benny, since he didn't kill the guy, Benny came back and bombed the dude's mailbox. Like, talk about a nasty streak, folks. That started to stoke a lot of controversy, let's put it that way, in the Dallas area. Benny and Chicago tried to get some politicians in office. That failed. Benny could see the writing was on the wall, so he grabbed a bag full of cash. Him, his wife, and his kids all drove on to Vegas, start a new life. And so when Benny finally arrived in Vegas, he spent little time creating his new empire. First thing he did was he opened Binion's Horseshoe. That was about 1951. in downtown Fremont Street, and while Vegas at the time was filled with lavish and luxurious hotels and casinos, the Horseshoe harkened back to the old downtown casinos with stardust floors. However, it was an instant success. Benny incorporated a lot of policies that were unique to Vegas at the time. For example, Binion wanted to encourage gamblers to spend as much money, and he served guests endless supply of alcohol for free. He initially set a craps table limit of $500, 10 times higher than the limits of his competitors at the time. As a result of outdoing the competition, being the notorious gangster he is, he received lots of death threats, although eventually casinos raised their limits to keep up with him. Most astonishing to Las Vegas residents, the Horseshoe became famous for accepting any bet a player would put on the table. I found that interesting. You just walk up, here's $1 million. All right, we'll take that bet. The Horseshoe was also famous for its chili, a homemade recipe that Benny had learned while in the Texas prisons. Another promotion Binions did was to put $1 million of his own money into a horseshoe-shaped display case so that people could have their picture taken with it. J.A. and I did this, and it's a funny story. So we were walking through there, and there, of course, is that thing of Binions. You get a free photo. If you've never done it, do it. We can't find the photo now. We're going to frame it. But there's a meme of Scrooge McDuck, like in money. So we both kind of put our hands up like we're swimming in money, like, yay. And it was like a 2 a.m. fun, Vegas romp thing. That was an interesting time. And I do like Binions. But back to the story. Binions did not leave his life of crime behind in Dallas. While he was fun and innovative promoter for the Horseshoe and the tourists, locals loved him, he also kept his fingers in his old lifestyle from Texas. Another little quote from American Experience, which is in the links below. His office was a booth in the Horseshoe's restaurant, where he would conduct all his business meetings with politicians and other members of his syndicate, or he'd simply mingle with the guests. Once when he was asked what his business secret was, Binion replied, "If you want to get rich, make people feel like they're big people. Good food, cheap, good whiskey, cheap, and a good gamble. That's all there is to it, son." So while promoter, he was still a gangster, and Vegas was the perfect spot for Benny. His gregarious, bellied, vicious streak, gamblers caught cheating at the Horseshoe were often physically punished. One of Binion's personal mottos was, "Do your enemies before they do you." He killed people and then killed the witnesses. One victim, a former FBI agent, Bill Corte, who Binions had blown up in a parking garage in 1972. Wow. And still remains an unsolved murder. Binions was never charged due to his supposed connections, apparently through the public office, which I will not name. Let's just put it this way, it was mob related again. However, his life of crime finally did catch up with him in Vegas. He spent time in prison, again, for a third time, for tax evasion, and once he got out, his gaming license revoked. However, this did not stop him. His sons and his wife took over the gaming while Benny stayed on and ran things behind the scene as a quote-unquote consultant. And while his days of casino owning were over, he was still considered a big shot in Vegas. He started the annual rodeo and also the World Series of Poker during the 70s. However, Benny would tell you himself he was not that good at poker, which I found funny. Sadly, Benny would die from heart failure in 1989. And after his death, his sons would run the hotel and casino. But again, guys, that's a story for another day. So my final thoughts on Benny was this guy was larger than life. He was who he was. He was a gangster through and through. And Vegas was the perfect spot for him. And he understood Vegas. He understood Vegas for its time and its lifestyle. And that's why he is a Vegas icon, folks. So that's all the time we have for today. Let me know in the comments below. Would you like to see more of these Vegas Icon series? If you guys don't like them, I won't do them. But coming up, I have some other items to discuss in the meantime. Got some more old buildings in Vegas. And I actually want to talk to you guys. I'm thinking of doing some interviews, setting up people that are Vegas fans themselves and just chatting. Make sure to hit that like button. And if you like the show, please leave a comment, or even better, click subscribe. And again, I'm on Twitter at Vegas_KA, and you can catch my show on Apple and Spotify. And so that's all the time we have for today, and I'll see you next time on Talking Vegas All Day with me, KA.